Who Dat Nation? Wazam. I am back. It is your second line sports host, Devin Johnson. I'm back. Man, it's been a long time, but it has been well worth it. Man, in this last year or so, since recording content for the YouTube channel, we've been blessed with having the opportunity of covering the Super Bowl, of being a beat reporter for Tulane. I've gotten a chance to interview a ton of guys, both in the NFL, former NFL legends. I've been able to converse with a lot of guys, that's in the sports world. Stephen A. Smith, Mad Dog Russo, just Dano, just all kinds of guys. So, I really do feel like in this last year or so, I've really been able to hone in, learn a lot, experience a lot. But now it's time to get back to doing what we do. It's time for us to provide the facts, provide the analysis. So, 2025 NFL draft, man, what can I say? Going into this draft, everyone had this one pegged as the most unpredictable draft that we have ever seen. And I will say it lived up to that billing. Uh, as a Saints fan, as a person who covers the Saints, a local New Orleanian, I had a lot of expectations to say the least. We've probably all heard before that the lower your expectations, the less pain you'll feel. But nah, I'm sorry. I'm always gonna have expectations. Especially I have expectations for myself. I have expectations for my sports teams that I enjoy, the Saints particularly. And that expectation is one of greatness. I grew up in a time to where I witnessed the greatness of Drew Brees. I witnessed, the high octane offense that we had, courtesy of Sean Payton. I witnessed the evolution from running back to running back. Deuce McAllister to Pierre Thomas to Mark Ingram. To eventually Alvin Kamara. Having no defense to having a no fly zone, the Rob Ryan years, the Dennis Allen years. I have been here. I'm only 25 years old, but I've seen a lot with the Saints. And I can say that, the era that we witnessed under Drew Brees, it left us a little spoiled, to say the least. We grew up watching a quarterback who was prolific on the field despite anything that was hindering him, on and off the field. On the field, Drew Brees was a dude that was considered miniature by NFL standards. He was a person that was considered to have an arm that was insufficient for the demands of the NFL. In addition to that, he was considered to be someone that was a castaway. We got him from the San Diego Chargers, and at the time, he was seen as someone who was just a bridge guy, or he wasn't expected to be the Hall of Fame caliber player that he was. With that being said, Drew Brees is gone, as we all know. The greatness that we once experienced, the high octane offense that we became accustomed to, is no longer the case. We are a rebuilding franchise. We are a growing franchise. And to be honest, right now, we're not that good of a franchise. So going into this draft, a draft in which we have a new brain trust at the helm, we have a young new head coach, we have a new defensive coordinator who has been proven, who's won before, who's made it to a Super Bowl, who's won a Super Bowl. We have a head coach who's also won a Super Bowl. So the expectations have returned. The expectations for winning have returned. The expectations for excitement has returned. Coming into this NFL draft, the Saints had the most exciting pick in the top 10. At pick number 9, we had all of the whisperings about potentially getting Shador Sanders. Will we trade down? Will we trade up? What will we do? Me and Jeff talked about it on Inside Black and Gold. I listed my top 5 positions of need. I had interior D line as one. I had outside pass rushes 2. Quarterback was 3. Cornerback, outside cornerback, boundary corner was 4, and I had guard as 5, particularly the left guard position, because I would feel as though that's the guard position that's the weakest for us. Um, Coming into this draft, I pretty much it was without question that the Saints would take, to me, a quarterback in the first round. Whether that was Shador Sanders, whether that was Jackson Dart, I think it got to the point for me personally, it didn't really matter. After the conclusion of last night, after the conclusion of the first round and the first 10 picks, the Saints did what I think we all the Saints did what we all didn't want them to do. They did what we least expected them to do. But they did the most Saints thing possible. The Saints drafted an offensive lineman. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to analyze this pick, to talk about it, to kind of diffuse maybe some of the confusion or the disappointment that came with that kind of pick. But from someone, who's played football, believe it or not, somebody who played on the offensive and defensive line, I can tell you that the Saints they made the right choice. They made the right choice. So let's get into it. So with the ninth pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints have selected Kelvin Banks, tackle out of University of Texas. Kelvin Banks is 6'5". He's listed at 315 pounds. He's said to have an arm length of about 33 and a half inches. Um, he played all 3 seasons while he was at Texas. He started at left tackle. He was fairly healthy. In his previous season, he won 3 different awards, designating him as the best offensive lineman in the country. He also shared one award with Will Campbell. But Kelvin Banks, what are the Saints getting in this guy? What are the Saints getting? He's listed as a tackle. We have tackles. We drafted Fuaga last year. We drafted Penning 2 years ago. What are we doing? So before I get into any kind of explanation on who Kelvin Banks is as a person, let me first detail who the Saints are as a team. The Saints are a team that has always prided itself on its offensive line. Um, if you want to, if you want to actually get into the detail and um, the specificities of what made the Drew Brees, Sean Payton era so um, efficient, was the fact that we always had a complementary offensive line handy. From the earliest days, we had Carl Nix, Jari Evans, Zach Streif. That eventually would translate to guys like Teron Armstead. We had Max Unger for a spell. We had Ramchek, obviously. The offensive line has always been something that the Saints have made a point of emphasis. The offensive line is the Saints' identity. So it doesn't completely anger me that the Saints chose to stick to what they have designated as their identity. And if we want to add to that point, we have to ask ourselves, who is the current leader of this Saints team? Who is the current person, and what is their philosophy that kind of goes into their identity? Our current leader is Kellen Moore. Our current leader is a descendant of the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles have, I would say, consensually been agreed upon to have probably the best O line for the last 3 years or so, 3 to 4 years. The Philadelphia Eagles are the reigning world champions. And I feel as though it would be a tremendous disservice to not only their offensive line, but the importance of an offensive line. If you were to say that their offensive line isn't one of the biggest factors in them being perennial Super Bowl contenders, but also them being champions this previous season. Kellen Moore learned tremendously from his time working at both, working as an offensive coordinator for Dallas and working as an offensive coordinator for the Eagles. Kellen Moore knows that a key, or the key, I should say, to any successful team is being able to run the football. And if you look at the Saints, because I'm trying to tie this all in, I know it's a lot. Um, the Saints historically have tried to run the football as well as we could. As good as a passer that Drew Brees was able to complement pretty well from the committee of running backs that he had. Um, and that will always bode well, for you as a team. If we look at the Eagles, this past Super Bowl champion, these guys literally ran their way to a Super Bowl. And it's honestly so bad that we're currently experiencing a potential rule change for the tush push because of how unstoppable they were. Now, while I think that this is extremely absurd, I think that it really does kind of speak to the dominance of the Eagles. It also speaks to the power of having a good old line. One of the reasons why the tush push was so unstoppable was the fact that it had one of the best units doing it. Um, while I don't expect us to be tush push masters like the Eagles, I do expect us to implement the same ideology and philosophy that made them the juggernaut that they are today, and that comes at the courtesy of having a great O line. Overall, I like the Kelvin Banks pick. When I look at our offensive line today, right, I can name two dudes for sure that are good, that I feel they're good. I feel like we're set, and these guys are franchise players, on the O line. The first one being our center, Eric McCoy. The second one being last year's first round pick, Talise Fuaga. I think Tallis Fuaga proved himself to be one of the centerpieces of our team going forward. I think he played extremely well, given the opportunities that he had playing against the physical defensive lines that we have in our division, but also in some of our outer division games. Going up against guys like Miles Garrett. And people of that nature, I feel like he showed a lot of promise. He showed poise. He showed an ability to adjust, and honestly, I feel like Tally East got better as the season got on. Eric McCoy, he's been a mainstay for us. He's been here for uh, going on maybe what 6 or 7 years. I think we drafted him in 2019. So he's been a mainstay for us, and since being here, he's been selected to a few Pro Bowls. But also, he's truly established a culture for our O line. Eric McCoy has, you know, taken up that mantle of doing line regulations, making line calls, blocking adjustments. He, is responsible every play for snapping the ball, which is extremely important. And I'm just speaking on all of this to kind of depict the bigger overall picture on how important O line is. It's not necessarily the position that we picked, it's the position group that we're trying to complete. And that's why I can say that I am especially appreciative of this pick, because Kelvin Banks is a player that will complete our O line. So, Kelvin Banks, I say he was a 3 year starter at Texas. This is a guy who played over, or I'm not going to say over, he played nearly 1,500 total snaps of pass protection. In those nearly 1,500, to be exact, it's 1,477. This dude only gave up 4 sacks. 4 sacks. You know what? Actually, I have my phone handy right here. I'm going to take the time to do the math for that, because logic is telling me that's a pretty crazy sack ratio, if you ask me. So that means that between 1,477 snaps, Kelvin Banks would only give up a sack every 370 snaps. Now, I'm no mathematician, right? But I can tell you right now, that means this guy is very elite in pass protection. This is a guy that does not suffer against guys rushing the passer. This is a guy who is consistent in his technique. He's confident in his technique. And he also played the most important position outside of center, I would say, on the offensive line. Now, with that being said, pass protection is not Kelvin Banks's strongest attribute as an offensive lineman. Interestingly enough, it is actually Kelvin Banks's run game ability that propels him. And I feel as though this is a guy that ultimately we're going to convert to guard. Now, we talked a lot about Will Campbell um, prior to the draft. You know, a lot of people had some excitement for him. A lot of people wanted to see him potentially in the black and gold uniform. Will Campbell, if he got drafted to the Saints, would have suffered the same fate that Kelvin Banks is about to experience, and that's getting moved to guard. I like Kelvin Banks being moved to guard because this shores up not only a position of need, but it shores up the most important position group. Kelvin Banks being slotted to our left guard will allow us to have tremendous stability in the pass game. Like saying that Trevor Penning is our weakest link going into week one to me isn't much of um a hindrance. Because Trevor Penning is getting better. Um Tally's Fuaga, you know, I feel as though he's gonna take another step up this upcoming year. Eric McCoy, Pro Bowl after just half the season being played. Cesar Ruiz, he's been a pretty consistent contributor when healthy. We gave him an extension. You know, we're committed to him. Kelvin Banks, this is the guy that completes it. Now we got a real starting five. Now we have the Avengers on the O line, and I like it. When you have a dominant offensive line, I have to say it puts you in a pretty advantageous position because the better your offensive line is, the more that you're allowed to do scheme wise. If you have an offensive line that is um, more so one dimensional, you know, you have a lot of guys that are maybe strong, good at getting pushed in the run game, but they're not as technically sound, you know, in pass pro. That can be a hindrance. That can be something that's a setback. The Saints now essentially have an offensive line that is full of athletic, big, scheme versatile guys. And that's something that I have preached, you know, for so long in terms of what is it that I feel like we need? What do we need? Um, we need to, you know, build up our offensive line so we can we can run what it is that we want to run. When you have a offensive line that is capable of getting out in space, that's capable of pass blocking, that's capable of getting pushed in the run, you know, that's capable of getting to the second level, you are then able to dictate what kind of offensive system you want to have. So I think, you know, for a coach like Kellen Moore, who is adept with RPO, he's adept with having mobile quarterbacks, more of a spread style offense. You know, I feel as though we're building the trenches to be able to handle that, and I truly do appreciate it. So, um, just to kind of shore things up, I want to say I genuinely do appreciate the Kelvin Banks pick. Even just to give, I guess, further context, um, Kelvin Banks is a player too that truly can play tackle. I mean, I think that, and I've said this before, even in the case of if we did take Will Campbell, right? I feel as though the organization isn't 100% dead set on Trevor Penning. And that's understandable. I mean, just last year, we finally got to see him actually play, but he's still not necessarily the player you want. You know, he might not be as far along as you would want him to be. I will say that. So we declined Trevor Penning's fifth option recently. You draft Kelvin Banks. It's a win-win because let's say we go into the season, right? And I'm just speaking theoretically. You know, I could talk about it later on what we will do. But let's just say theoretically we go into the season with Spencer Rattler at quarterback. I am much more confident in Spencer Rattler with a starting five of Fuaga, Banks, McCoy, Ruiz, Penning than I am of Fuaga, whoever, McCoy, Ruiz, Penning. Like, I need to have some kind of certified name in there. And Kelvin Banks is that. He's a blue chip guy. I just said, he only gave up 4 sacks over the span of essentially 3 seasons. He was able to show some adversity. He suffered an ankle injury in the Georgia game in the SEC championship game. He came back, and he was able to play in the playoffs. Um, he's athletic, as I've said. The measurables are pretty good. I remember watching Mel Kiper, and he had some questions about his size. He said, "Is he a tweener? Is he 6'3", 6'4"?" Comes in at the combine, he measures in at an official 6'5". So that's great size, great versatility. I saw a lot of intelligence with him. Given that he did play tackle in college, he had to deal with stunts. He had to deal with recognizing different shifts in defense and rush attacks. And those are things that I think that he was able to handle. He handled it well. I saw a decisiveness from him. I saw an ability to diagnose, and I saw relatively sound play. Now, I will say, if I had to speak on weaknesses potentially, one thing that I did notice, and I think that this comes as a result of maybe his lack of ideal length, is that he would sometimes lean just a little bit in pass protection. And as an offensive lineman, when you're pass blocking, you want to keep your chest up, keep your chest out, stay extended. But when you lean, you make it easier for a guy to, knock you over, knock you off balance. So when you're 300 pounds, you need to be sturdy. You got to be sturdy. So that's one thing I can say. But outside of that, that's pretty correctable. He looked pretty good. He looked pretty good. Like he looked like a top 10 pick. I can't say that. Like I can't knock him. I can't say that he doesn't look like he deserved it or he belongs. No, that's not the case. So I think Kelvin Banks is extremely talented. It's not the most exciting. It's not a corner. It's not a quarterback. It's not Shador. But it's someone that if we were to get a Shador, if we were to get a top flight quarterback, oh, he's very appreciative that Kelvin Banks is on his team. Best believe that. So we got a guy that is important. And I just think that's all that needs to be stated, and that's what needs to be noted and internalized is that we didn't get the splash pick, but we got the pick that we needed. We got the pick that goes into building a championship team. The real MVP of the 2023 or the 2024-2025 Eagles team that just won this past championship was their offensive line. Jalen Hurts will tell you that. Saquon Barkley will tell you that. Their defense might tell you that. So I respect this because Kellen Moore is building on the ideology that he has found success with. And honestly, he's building upon the ideology that is the fundamental to football. If you want to have a successful offensive scheme, whether that be, uh, through the air or on the ground, you have to have an offensive line. You have to. When your big boys are good, it doesn't matter how good whoever's in the backfield. So I'm excited. Obviously for tonight, I'm gonna do some more insights on whoever we select. hopefully we get a corner. Hopefully, we get a receiver, something, man. Just something. I'm not being overly analytical right now. I'm being optimistic. You know, we have a lot of positions that we have to fill. Um so far so good. We stuck with our identity. Kellen Moore stuck with his identity. So, rejoice a bit because again, if you want to win, you need those big boys up front, right? So, Kelvin Banks, welcome to the Saints, man. I'm extremely excited to have you. And yeah, we're excited. Who that? Who that? Let's get it.